Well, good morning. So, when our children were getting old enough to go out at night, like to parties or after prom events or, just get togethers, as they left the elementary years and moved into middle school and high school, I worried a little bit about how they might navigate any temptations that might, temptations or peer pressure that they might face. So I would tell them that if they ever felt uncomfortable and wanted to leave whatever party they might have been at or whatever situation they were in, that all they needed to say was, "My mom called and she wants me to come home." Now, since I worked at the school, right, most of their friends knew me. So they weren't going to argue when or if my kids said, "Mom called and I got to go." See, my parenting choice was to let the kids just blame me. Now, I don't recall a time, and I was talking to my daughter about this yesterday, and her response was, "Well, Mom, I was never in those situations, so of course I didn't need to use it." Not so sure about her brother. But I don't recall a time when I ever had to use this strategy, but at least it made me feel better knowing we had a plan, right? We have a plan in place. Of course, it was a short-term plan because time waits for no one. And before long, they were heading off to college. And they definitely wouldn't be able to tell their friends that Mom just called and told me I had to go home. So at that point, they were on their own. They, at that point, had to make decisions about living their lives without blaming me or anybody. It's this concept of taking responsibility for our lives that came to mind for me when Kurt told me that this week's sermon was going to be, "God never gives us more than we can handle." This sentence, "God never gives us more than we can handle," sounds a little bit like blaming God for the circumstances of our lives. We are the immature children, not quite ready to stand on our own 2 feet, and our own choices turn to scapegoat. So we blame God for our troubles. When in reality, so much of the stress in our lives is self-imposed. Though not true everywhere in the world, it is true that in the United States, people have a fairly high level of choice in their lives. What will I do to earn an income? Who will I date? Do I want to commit to one person for the rest of my life? Do I want a family? How much house or how many cars can I afford? And sometimes, no matter how hard we work or how well-intentioned we are, things fall apart. And when we are still immature in our faith, it is easy to blame the falling apart part on God. We're often able to own our successes, but we have more trouble sometimes owning our failures. I have this mental image of God acting as a scientist, conducting an experiment. You've got this balance, scale of balance, and we're hanging in balance, and then God comes along and says, "I'm just going to throw one more piece on there and see if they can handle that." Right? He keeps putting weight on our shoulders to see how long it is before we fall over. Granted, there are things that happen in our lives that are out of our control. occurrences that occur in our lives that we have no control over and we have nothing to do with. Sickness, accidents, natural disasters, downsizing at work, pandemics, death of a loved one, events for which we aren't responsible. Yet, isn't it difficult to believe that the God we love sends these things to us? That the God we love would just keep testing us to see how much we can bear? Our God, a God defined as love, isn't there to keep adding weight to our shoulders or to keep piling burdens on us until we break. God's not there to harm us. He is there to support us, hold us, and comfort us, to lift the weights of this life from our shoulders, not to keep putting them on. Humankind and human beings make choices that sometimes tips our own scales. And with God's help, our choices don't end up putting more weight on us than we can handle. But when we struggle trying to handle the messes we have created, He is there to get us through. As followers of Christ and children of God, if we choose to grow and mature in our faith, there comes a time when it's no longer appropriate to blame our Heavenly Father for the choices we make, whether individually or collectively as the human race. There comes a time when we need to own our choices and navigate those consequences. So instead of asking, why is God doing this to me? We might be better served to remember that God is our refuge and our strength and ever-present help in times of trouble. Welcome to worship. We are so glad you're here.